Testing. Yeah, working.
So believe it or not, we did have 80 people registered today. So you don't know how much I appreciate you people that showed up. Thank you so much. Thank you. Next week on Monday, we have Jeremy Burke in to talk about stuff to make your life easier in your business. And on Thursday, we have Allison Walsh from Denton's in to talk about the tips and traps, whether you want to be an employee or a contractor, so things to consider. Today, I'm happy to introduce our panel. First, I'm going to start with Sydney. Sydney here is our president of our Enactus Club, and she got voluntold that she was going to be the moderator today. So we appreciate you, Sydney.
It's not wrong.
But then she got told she's getting paid, so it's not really that bad, is it? Next, we have Katrina.
You getting paid?
Sorry, Nathan, no. Good question, though. Next, we have Katrina. Hey, guys. Thanks. Next, we have Katrina Ingram. Katrina is the Chief Operating Officer for Cannabis at Work, a recruiting, training, and consulting firm dedicated exclusively to the cannabis industry. She spent her early career in the technology sector, first in a series of startups and then building partner marketing relationships for a global software vendor. She segued into media, joining the CBC, where she managed marketing and communications for CBC Radio 1 in Vancouver. Upon moving to Edmonton, she joined CKUA as their COO. And in 2017, Katrina helped launch the Alberta Podcast Network, to which we have a podcast on called Let's Do Coffee, where you will find lots of amazing podcasts, local podcasts. She is host and producer of the Back to School Again podcast as well. She's volunteer board member with Rosa Foundation, committee member with Workshop West Playwrights Theatre, and she was named one of Edmonton's top 100 businesswomen in 2013. Now, about Karmen. Karmen is also the leader of our Becoming a Fearless Leader program, which we launched this year. Karmen has served as a leader in Alberta's justice system and in the charitable sector for over 20 years. She became a lawyer in 1997 and has practiced law for a total of 15 years. And in 2001, she founded the local charity you may have heard of called Suit Yourself, which provides business attire to disadvantaged women searching for jobs. After leading all aspects of the charity's development for a decade on a volunteer basis, she left the job as a lawyer and government executive to become executive director for the charity, overseeing an increase in the number of clients from 300 to 600 per year, and an increase in the number of volunteers from 30 to over 100. As a result of her leadership in the charitable sector, she was honored as the Avenue Magazine Top 40 Under 40 and a Global Woman of Vision. In her spare time, does she have any? She also taught law at NAIT for several years. She later returned to the justice system, taking on senior management and executive roles, and eventually led teams of 275 employees in 13 court locations across the province. In 2017, Karmen became a certified executive coach, embracing her entrepreneurial spirit, started her own professional coaching practice and leadership consultancy. And last but not least, Nathan.
The least.
No. Nathan studied economics at the University of Alberta. We will not hold that against him. The economics part, I mean. Upon graduating in 2007, Nathan went on to establish his own consulting firm, Nathan Kawulka Consulting. In 2016, Nathan became the vice president and co-owner of Arbus Construction, Calgary and Edmonton. More recently, Nathan has embarked on a venture alongside Edmonton's Youth Empowerment and Support Services. Yes, and founded Yes Painting, an organization that helps youth facing difficult realities gain flexible and accommodating employment, providing them with the tools and the skills they need to succeed. So we really look forward to hearing from all of you today.
So first off, this is on, right? Everybody can hear me? Okay. So first off, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity, and I'm really excited to do this. So one thing that I'm going to start with, which probably no one saw coming, is what does leadership mean to you? Good one.
You want us to go in order here?
Okay.
Okay.
However you feel.
All right. Yeah, so leadership for me is all about stepping up, and it's about setting an example and actually doing things, sometimes doing things you don't really feel like doing at that moment. There's lots of times where, I don't feel like leading the meeting, but I really need to do it. So for me, it's about stepping up and kind of modeling that behavior.
Exactly what she said. One of my favorite authors right now is a woman named Brené Brown, and she defines leadership in a way that just resonates so strongly with me. And Brené defines leadership as stepping up or taking responsibility to find the potential in people and processes, and then having the courage to actually develop that potential. So that's what it's for me.
Well, I second and third all of what they just said. For me, there's this concept called servant leadership, and really what that is for me is creating an environment where people can exceed and finding ways to help your staff, employees, team members, whatever it happens to be, actually find their best. And it's finding the skills and abilities, maybe latent, maybe hidden, with the people that you work with, and help them be the best they possibly can be for you, for your team, for your business, whatever it happens to be. That.
So kind of adding on to that, what do you think are some common misconceptions that people think about leadership or that they have, and what it means to lead, and how would you combat those?
It's fun. I think if I was like 18, again, I had longer hair then. If somebody's going to ask me what being a leader was about, it's, being the boss and being in charge and like getting paid the most and all that kind of stuff. But really in the end, it's the biggest responsibility. It's the person who turns the lights out at the end of the day. It's the person who sacrifices and struggles along with their people, and sometimes you as a leader have to sacrifice your own time, money, mental sanity to make sure that your people and your business are taken care of. And I think that the misconception that it's cool or fun or whatever, it's a responsibility and it's hard. And I think that the people who really want to be leaders should really think about whether they're willing to put in the work that's required to make it successful.
Add that I think there's this myth that leaders are born, and I would say leaders are made. Like, leadership is a learned skill, and I believe everybody has the capacity to be a leader. So I think that everyone here, if you aspire to being a leader, you can learn those skills. I know that when I was in school, I kind of always bought into that born leadership dynamic, and I never saw myself as a leader consequently. So it took me a long time to figure that out and then to learn the skills to lead.
I'll add that I think a lot of people think that the most effective leaders are the ones who push and kick and direct and are really good at driving results. And yeah, some of those people can be fantastic leaders, but they don't have to be. And I think that there's a lot of room and a lot of potential in other types of backgrounds or motivations where people come from. You don't have to be super duper outgoing and out there to be a great leader. So I think that's a common misconception.
When you guys are describing like what leadership means to you and stuff, do you think there's someone, or you're picturing someone in your head that fits that description, and who are they, and tell us a little bit about them?
Well, for me, my former boss, Ken Regan, he was the CEO of CKUA. We worked together for 10 years, and he was a large part of why I stayed at CKUA for so long. I just really enjoyed working for him. And he was the kind of person always had time for you. So he had an open door, and you could wander in there. You could bring your concerns to the table. And he would always listen to what you had to say. And he really modeled empathetic leadership for me. And so when I think of an inspiring leader, he comes to mind right away.
I'm going to mention somebody who, and know that in my background, in my career, I worked in a lot of hierarchies. And there was a woman that I worked with in the last few years who, in our hierarchy, her role or her position was technically below mine, quite a few levels below mine. Yet her leadership, I actually aspired to it. And what happened was I was working on something, and it was new in my area, in my field. It was a new skill. And this woman, again, few levels below, excelled in that skill. And she kind of invited me into her world. And I embraced that, and she saw the potential in me. And so I think that she's a fantastic example of somebody who can inspire, and I'll aspire to be, yet the positional thing didn't really matter.
Well, I've had one mentor in my life, and I think probably about one person that I've ever looked up to. Same person. He was the president of the company that I worked for in university, Student Works Painting. And how do I sum it up? He was a really hard-charging, like that kind of leader. Like pushed people super hard, yelled, screamed, was super difficult, kind of an asshole, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, beneath all of that veneer of total super hard-assness, he was actually a really good guy. But I kind of took him as a counter-example to the way that I want to lead and the kind of person that I want to be for the rest of my life, because all of that hard charging and whatnot was really hard on him, hard on his family, hard on his life, and did not turn out well for him, unfortunately. But I kind of took that as a counterexample, because I saw this person who had made all this money, who had this really successful company, who, you know, drove the Porsche, had the vacation properties, like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, oh, I could aspire to be this person. Like, cool, awesome. Like, this person is really doing it. But the more I got to know him and the more I worked with him on like a one-on-one mentorship basis, I just realized that I could not be that person. And I just wanted to be kinder to the people that I worked with, and more understanding and more nourishing and supporting and that kind of thing. So
I just want to jump in because it sounds like you were talking about Steve Jobs there for a minute. And I think, you know, those are the kinds of people that often get held up as leaders, people like Steve Jobs. And they're absolutely visionary, wonderful people at that level. But I think working for someone like that would be really, really challenging. And so I think it's interesting that we all cited kind of like more personal examples of people that we are close to, who we want to aspire to be, and also who we don't want to be like.
I really liked Carmen's point where you can have inspired to look like a leader even when it's not a hierarchy system. It doesn't have to be that authoritarian figure necessarily, which I think is really cool. Do you think that there is, or can you share like the aha moment that you guys have maybe had along your career paths in respect to leadership?
I'll start maybe this time. Early on in a role that Cecile had described, where I led a team of folks, about 275 people across the province. Early on in that role, I had this opportunity to restructure all of the managers across the province. And there was a one manager in a regional location who, to me, was just different. And we're restructuring, and I had this question mark on this one person about her difference compared to the other folks and kind of where I wanted to go with the organization very early on. So I remember talking to somebody about her and actually describing this manager as, well, she's different. So I was negative, I admit it. She's different. And the person said to me, aren't we all different? And I paused some more, and I didn't say any more, and I thought about that one, and I embraced that one, and we restructured, and I kept that person there because she was different, and because I realized in that day going forward that I needed to embrace the different. So that was my aha moment.
Have you guys heard of something called imposter syndrome? Has anybody heard of that? Yeah, a couple people. So my aha moment was I was listening to this really amazing woman speak. I mean, this woman had been a VC. She'd been very high up in Shaw Cable. Just one of those people that you think is like, wow, that's a super achiever, somebody who I would aspire to be like. And she was talking about how she suffered from this thing called imposter syndrome. And what that is when you don't feel like you actually belong in the position that you're currently in. And I was just shocked to hear this because here was this super accomplished person talking about the fact that they felt like an imposter. And it really spoke to me because in the early days of my leadership journey, I really felt like an imposter too. I really felt like someone was going to find out that I didn't belong here and they were going to call me out on it. And it really took me a while to kind of get over that and realize that we all feel a level of that to some degree. And anytime you go into a new situation, you're going to feel a little bit of that. But that doesn't mean that you can't be a leader. So that was my aha moment.
I've been in charge of, I guess, a number of companies. And along the way, every time I start a new thing, there's this new sort of slap in the face that I get. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got this. It's like, good, I can handle this. It's totally fine. Like, I'm on top of it. And then something crazy happens. And then I'm like, oh, fuck. We're allowed to swear, right? Because it's too late. Exactly. If you're offended, you can talk to me after. So I've had probably at least a few of those, but probably the biggest thing for me is right before I started Yes Painting, I had a big life moment, and I had a relationship that was going really well, and she had a child, and we were talking about moving in together, and had a successful company going, and everything was heading in the right direction. And that all kind of went away, and then I had this opportunity to look at my life and say, what am I doing? And with the construction company, yes, it's a company that makes money, that's great, but I eventually came to this point where I want to be doing something more with my life than simply just making money. And that's why I started the Yes Painting concept, and it gives me the opportunity to actually really help people that need help. And I guess along the way of the self-transformation that happened, there's a lot of yoga and meditation and psychotherapy. And so along the way, there was probably a bunch of aha moments, but really in the end, I think the biggest thing for me, leadership-wise, was determining who I wanted to be and how I wanted to help the world. So.
Yeah, do you guys think that this aha moment defined what you kind of take forward and how you make and shape the rest of your decisions? Or give an example? I think kind of just gave an example, but
Yep.
I think for me, just an extension of that little story that I told about the woman who was different, it made me realize that, the obvious, embrace difference. But it also made me realize that pausing and talking to people about these ideas that we all have and getting input and thinking about things differently, and again, pausing some more, is a good thing. And in our day and age of instantaneous communication and expectation of response, that pause is hard. And that's something I will say I have to work on it all the time, because I like to have an answer right now. But pause is a good thing.
I think a lot of people like that immediate response thing.
Yeah, I think just to that point of pausing and not having the answers, I think that's another part, or maybe another misconception of leadership, is that you have all the answers, that you're going to be able to figure everything out. And really, that hasn't been my experience at all. And I think it's having the confidence to know that maybe you don't have all the answers, but that doesn't mean you can't lead, and that doesn't mean you can't contribute. And in fact, building relationships with people to actually find the best answers collectively, that's the best way to go. And you can really only do that by taking that pause.
And I think just to add to that, I think the idea is vulnerability as a leader, and you don't always have to be this person who's seen as like the boss and super in charge. You have to say, oh, hey, you know, I don't know the answer to this, or maybe I don't have the best answer, or maybe I need to seek a lot of counsel. And rather than just going and hard charging through that idea or that thing or telling people what to do or super bossy or that kind of deal, it's the pause, it's the letting people know that you are willing to accept their ideas and look at their ideas and seek counsel. And I think that vulnerability lets people understand that you're willing to do what's right for the business or for the organization or for the people in the end.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think a lot of times people forget that leaders are allowed to not know what they don't know, which is kind of a big thing. So this is one question that I think is really exciting, and I'm really excited for the answer, is what do you think the biggest challenge as a leader you face today?
Well, for me in the cannabis industry, it's the pace of the industry itself and the fact that we're just forming as an industry. Everybody's a startup. We're a startup. Our clients are startups. The regulation itself is in startup phase. So there's a whole bunch of learning curves within learning curves that are taking place. And quite frankly, I feel overwhelmed on a daily and a weekly basis. And so we actually had a conversation. We had a bi-weekly staff meeting the other day, and we had a conversation about the fact that we're all feeling a little overwhelmed. And it was really nice just to be able to put that on the table with the team and have kind of an open dialogue about it and set some expectations about how we want to work together to kind of sustain our company and sustain ourselves. So that's my big challenge right now.
Wow, makes my challenges seem so tiny. So to kind of contrast that, yeah, like huge industry, newness, that fantastic example. For myself, I work for myself now. I'm newer on the entrepreneurial side of things, although I've been involved off and on throughout my entire career. But to really focus on the development of my own business at this point in time, to be really honest, my biggest challenge is me. And despite, I'll say it, the successes that I've had in my career, I face fears and doubts about myself and my capability, and every day, there's no doubt about it. It's something I think all of us have, but as a leader and as an entrepreneur, it's something I need to work on all the time. And thankfully, in the industry that I'm in coaching, I have lots of support by my fellow coaches to help me kind of over some of those hurdles.
Yeah, I think as a leader, it's I mean, you can have business challenges, you can have interpersonal challenges, but I think in the end, like, your biggest challenge generally is going to be yourself, and the time that you put in and confidence and what you're doing to recharge yourself so that you can be excellent for your business or your venture or your people or your family or whatever it happens to be. And I have that, oh my God, is this actually going to work out sort of thing happen to me all the time, because I've got 3 different businesses that are early stages, let's say some, 8 years, 5 years, 1 year. And it's a question of like, oh shit, like, there's so much stuff relying upon me to work. And there's all of these people's jobs, and there's all of my jobs, and there's like the family and the house and all that kind of stuff. And it all relies upon my brain and my ideas to make things work. And not exclusively, of course, but this is the conversation that happens in your mind. And it's then sitting down and challenging yourself to say, okay, who can I get help with this? Who can I talk to? And that kind of thing. That's the real challenge, is really just yourself, getting yourself to do the things that you want yourself to do and be the person you want to be. So that.
So all of you are from very, very different industries, which I think is nice as a panel. And all your industries have definitely evolved over the years. Could you give me a little bit more of like insight as to how you think like your leadership styles have adapted to kind of accommodate all the industry changes?
I think for me, it's not been a question of adapting to change from the industry. It's been adapting to like my life, like the universe. Sorry, hippie moment for a second here. The universe has asked me to be a different person. So I've had challenges and opportunities like thrown in my path, and it's been up to me to say, okay, yes, I will do this, and yes, I will take on the responsibility, the risk, the struggle, whatever it happens to be. So I've been asked just to be a better leader by myself or whatever, God, universe, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can call it whatever you like, but I've been granted the opportunity to work on myself a lot, and it's not been as a result of industry, it's been more as a result of opportunity.
I contrast my life a year ago as Chief Operating Officer of CKUA Radio and my life now in the cannabis space, also in a COO role, but at a startup. And so it's very different. So, I mean, CKUA is still not a super big organization. It is by community radio standards, so about 60 people. But it's an organization that's it's going to be 91 years old in a couple of weeks. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of tradition. There's a lot of people that have been there for a really, really long time. There's a process that's known. The industry itself, radio, it doesn't change all that much. So, and I had more people, 60 people is different than leading 6 people in a startup. So for me, it's about adapting to the context of where I'm leading now rather than maybe adapting my leadership style. And it's been an interesting journey. I've only been doing this for 90 days, so I'm still super new. But yeah, it's quite a different vibe working in a startup than working in kind of a 90-year-old institution.
And that 90-plus year institution is where my background comes from in the legal profession. The legal profession, in my own opinion, is turtle slow to move. And so when I have been involved in making changes that are seen as very positive for the people who use the court system, I get really excited and love those projects. Unfortunately, the system is slow to change, and so I left the system partially because of the frustration involved in that type of system. And so what I do now is I work with lawyers and law firms, but in a different capacity. And I'm there to support them and to champion them so that they can stand up and help change that system. And so that's how I've adapted to a system of slow change, is to try to seek out the folks who want to help make change in that very slow moving system. So it's a different side of things for me, but to be able to tap into other people's capabilities and their potential is it's a pretty exciting place to be in a slow moving system.
Jump around here for a second. Is there something that you guys do on a regular basis or a daily basis to ensure your growth and development as a leader continues? And if you do, what is it? Or will you share it with us?
For me, it's gratitude and just like being thankful every day, like trying to say thanks to people on your team, even just people you encounter in life, people at the grocery store, that sort of thing. Like, I think it's really important to kind of cultivate a sense of gratitude. And I think that's important for leadership to keep that sense of humility. Like, I think it's all too easy to kind of, if you're not grateful for what you have and where you are, to kind of maybe develop that ego in an unhealthy way. And so for me, that kind of keeps me grounded and keeps me real. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful.
Answer. That was really good.
For me, it's really about asking more questions every day, speaking less, learning more from other people.
I've got this thing where, despite the fact that I run a business that is incredibly insane, where I may have 7 people show up, I may have 2 people show up, I may have 0 people show up, and I still have to make sure that the jobs that we're committed to get done, which is a bit of a struggle. But what occurs to me on a pretty regular basis is that everything works out perfectly. And for me, it's just like, I just look at stuff and I'm like, oh man, that's like totally perfect. Like I turned out to be totally on time despite everything being like way behind schedule or like not people showing up or this or that or the other. So I think it kind of goes towards that idea of gratitude, but it's the idea of like everything works out just fine. And then I guess a few other things that I do, yoga, meditation, and those things generally help a lot as far as like focus, calm, ability to be super duper patient and kind to people. And then I've got some rules: show up on time, do what you say please and thank you all the time. And those 4 rules are actually really, really hard to do because if you have to do every single thing that you say you're going to do, even if you don't want to do it, show up to a friend's birthday party, show up to a leadership panel. Although I really wanted to do this. This is super cool. So it's like those rules are sort of like my guiding principles. And then all of the other stuff is just additional content on top of that. But like if you can honestly look at every day and find something that worked out perfectly, then I think that that idea of gratitude is just going to like bleed into your life pretty commonly. And so I don't necessarily go after gratitude. I do remind myself sometimes, gratitude. Thank you for having us. But that perfection thing is like, it's like feels so great, and it brings a huge smile to my face every time. I'm like, oh yeah, perfect, awesome.
So for all of you guys in companies and for yourself, Karmen, and your own profession, how do you guys keep yourselves or your team members, your coworkers, staff motivated and inspired? And how does that differ from how you keep yourself motivated and inspired? Nobody likes this question.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily keep my staff inspired, because that's a lot to ask, I think. Inspiration, I think, kind of comes in from within, for the most part. So you can give them the environment where inspiration could happen. But I mean, in my construction company, I work with contractors. So they're generally motivated because they want to pay bills and all that kind of thing. So there's not a lot of work that has to happen there. But I think that for those companies, really, it's just being a decent person most of the time. And I'm not sure if any of you have ever worked in construction or been around it, but most of the time, people are not super duper decent to each other. So just being a good person in that business is decent. As far as motivation and inspiration in the Yes Painting side of my life, it's asking questions about what people want to do with their lives, and then helping them make that happen. So I kind of call it ideal future self. So who you want to be, what you want to be when you grow up, that kind of deal. And then finding ways to remind them of the path that they're working on towards that. And maybe that inspires them, maybe it doesn't, but it certainly does keep them motivated when you remind them that they're working for something greater than just today.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So a small thing and a big thing. So a small thing that we've added to our team meetings is a category called Celebrate. And anybody can bring up a Celebrate. And it can be anything. We won a deal, or we dealt with a difficult situation. We moved our offices. We actually did move our offices last week, and it went really well. So just it can be anything, but it's important, again, to kind of have that little moment where you say, yeah, we did good. And I think that keeps people motivated and inspired. So that's kind of the smaller thing. And I guess the bigger thing, to Nathan's point, is like trying to tap back into that why. Like the why are we here? Why is our organization here? What are we doing? What's our purpose? Some of you probably know of Simon Sinek. He talks about the why a lot and just tapping into that bigger purpose. So I think if you can do that as an organization and get really clear on that, and really believe it, like at a heart level, not just at a, throw it up on the wall and forget about it level, but really at a heart level and raise that in conversation with people, then that, I think that drives that inspiration over time.
I'm going to add, but I'm going to almost step back. Even before you get to being able to motivate people and kind of I think the buzzword is engage people, a lot of people don't even want to contribute in your teams or in anyone's teams unless they feel safe. And to challenge people to step up and to challenge the process and to think about things differently, they need to feel safe. So I find that, especially in the work that I do in the legal industry, it's about creating a safe, comfortable space where there's trust and where people will feel okay making mistakes and being vulnerable, and taking risks and knowing that they're not going to get punished if they make a suggestion that doesn't work. So I think it's, it's a great question, Sydney, but I think it starts like really at a really like the root of the question comes down to how do you even start the relationship or the connection with the folks that are on your teams and that you're working with, and how do you create that safety?
Totally. I couldn't agree more. It's like, really in the end, it's like if you look at leadership, it's like, comes down to like one-on-one relationships with people. And if you build a good relationship with people, then anything is possible.
How are we doing for time? Okay, good. I still have some more. We're doing so great. So I want to ask one more group question, and then we can do some individual ones. So a lot of us here are students, obviously. So is there something that you could give us, like some little bit of advice for people who are just trying to find themselves and find their leadership style, or just starting out in that kind of position?
I would say take on a leadership role, and you're going to figure out what your style is. So for me, it's all about jumping into something. I'm sure there are opportunities to lead a committee of some sort, beyond in student government, be part of an event or something of that nature. Like, I think taking on a leadership role and actually working it out in the field will serve you a lot better than just reading about it or theoretically trying to understand it. So for me, my advice would be to do it.
Join an actives. Pitch there. Yeah, just a little bit.
Before I answer, I need to ask the audience something. How many of you have children? Quite a few, okay. So a lot of people that I work with come to me and say, you know what, I've got this family life, I really highly value it, I don't want to screw it up, and I have a career. How can I even be expected to consider stepping up as this leader thing when I've got these other things on my plate, and they're darn big, important things for me? And I think my best advice is don't be scared, or be scared, it's okay, but ask for support. Don't be scared to ask your partner or somebody that you know to help and lend a hand, whether it's to be a partner to help you to be a leader, to help you do something great and fantastic that you want to do, or it's to help take care of your kids once in a while so that you can mentally get away and do the other things you need to do. But for myself, for many, many years, I was a person who always said yes to everything, took on way, way, way too much, and burnt out many times over. And so my best advice to people is don't be scared to ask for support.
Yeah, just do it before you're ready. If you don't think you're ready, no problem. Just start. Nobody ever really thinks they're going to be ready to lead or parent or run a business or start school or whatever, public speaking. It honestly doesn't matter. Like, whatever you want to do with your life, just don't be worried about not being ready. Just start, and you'll figure it out. And if you fuck up, just ask for help along the way, or ask for help before you fuck up. I do it the other way around, but up to you.
Potato, potato. So now we're going to do individual questions. I'm going to start with Nathan, I guess. So have you ever thought about selling your business? Why or why not?
Okay. I think that if you're going to run a business, you should always have, what do they call it? An
Contingency.
exit plan. Yeah, there you Succession plan, exit plan, whatever you want to call it. So for me, it basically comes down to your business should be good enough that you can sell it, whether you want to or not. So if it's ready to be sold, that means you've got really good systems or SOPs or whatever people are calling them these days. And you've got really good people, they're well trained, you've got good suppliers, you've got good relationships, you've got a good financial situation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're doing it like that, then somebody would want to buy your business. Whether you want to sell it or not is kind of up to you at that point, but that is the point of kind of running a business, is that you start it, make it great, and then you have the opportunity to sell it, or you have the opportunity to franchise it, or whatever else you want to do with it. But I think that's kind of the vision of going forward with it, is that you need to have that endpoint. Where are we going with this? So if you don't have that, then your business is going to be really hard to be successful, because you don't have a final plan on where you want to get to. If you don't have that, you can't plan backwards to the beginning and say, okay, how are we going to do this? So yes, I've thought about it, but we're not ready yet.
So I'm just going to go in order. So Karmen, in the line of work and the executive training and coaching that you do you think that there's something that those people could learn from this generation of students?
Interesting question, because when I look around the room, I don't see a particular demographic per se. So there's a diverse group and there's a crowd here. There's many ages. There's there's such a so what can we learn from that? Probably going back to what I said earlier about it's okay to be different, and it's so cool to be different, and it doesn't really matter if you're 20 years old or if you're 67 years old and you want to be an entrepreneur. You're just different, and that's really cool, and embrace it and go with it.
So Katrina, now that legalization has occurred and your guys' business is kicking off, how do you guys see yourselves and the company being leaders in that industry, or in general?
Great question. So yeah, we got into the space really early, back in 2015, before legalization was a thing yet. So that helped us to stake out some territory and kind of, I think, take a leadership role in this space. But now that it is a thing, I see everybody wanting to be part of it. And so it's interesting when you're kind of in a leadership position as an organization, how do you stay in that position? So it's about defending your territory on a couple of different fronts. So we do recruitment. That's one of our main things that we do, training and HR consulting. And what I see is, recruitment companies maybe wanting to come into the cannabis space and do some work there, or training companies creating courses that we already have. And so it's an interesting challenge, I think, staying competitive in that industry. Certainly a lot of it is reputation. We take a lot of time out to come and talk to folks like you, making sure that we're out there talking to the community, talking to the media, and just being well represented. And I think that bodes well in terms of staying on top of your game.
So that's all I have. Questions, anybody? Anybody? I can run up a mic to do questions.
Thank you, Katrina, Karmen, and Nathan. I'm interested in hearing, and I've got notes here. Is right. I hate to do this to you, but can you offer, like, I don't know, a methodology or tool that you use or you find useful when dealing with employees, clients, and contractors in very different ways? A way in which that you lead by example or not for finding a work-life balance.
Okay, so the question was, do you have a methodology for leading a work-life balance, roughly? Yeah. Mm-hmm. The funny thing is that I work with contractors. I work with my business partners in Calgary and my business partners in Edmonton, and then I work with a bunch of youth from difficult realities in the painting business. So I kind of work with a lot of different varieties of people, and work-life balance for me doesn't exist. I feel like they're not separate. My work is part of my life is part of my work, and if something's going terrible in my life, then it's going to affect my work. And if something's going terrible at work, then it's going to affect my life. So I think really it's more of like a balancing act of saying, okay, I need to make sure that I take care of myself so that I am fulfilled. Because if you are not fully fulfilled, you have nothing to give. And you can't give what you don't have. So if you're not happy, you're not going to be able to help other people be happy. If you're not kicking ass and taking names and really loving what you're doing, then you cannot give that to anybody else. So you absolutely have to take care of yourself, whether it be through your relationships, through your family, through friends, through working out or exercise, or whatever it is that you really love to do that's going to refresh you, you have to do. It is your responsibility as a leader to take care of yourself, because if you're not doing that, then you cannot lead.
I feel like you're talking directly to me, Nathan, because I already admitted I feel overwhelmed right now. And you know, when you're in a new job and you just want to impress everyone, and so I mean, that's where I'm at right now. It's been 90 days and I've been in a new industry and it's crazy and I'm trying to do a great job. And I'm used to being that person who at the end of the day kind of gets all her tasks done. And I haven't been that person in a little while, and it's been getting to me a little bit. And what I've been noticing is all those great habits that Nathan just listed that I know are absolutely essential have been slipping. So I haven't been eating regularly or eating healthy when I do have time to eat, or you know, skipping out on that workout to work a little bit later on a project. So I know I need to get back on track, and so I don't know if I have any advice at this moment, except for I know I need to get back on track, and it's just, you know, also being kind to myself and saying, yeah, you know, you're slipping a bit, so you're gonna make time for the gym next week, and then be, you know, celebrate the fact that I actually made it there.
I think also towards that idea is that balance on a day or a week or a month is maybe not necessarily work-life balancy. There are times where you have to absolutely like sacrifice everything for the cause or the goal or the whatever it happens to be. And I think, yeah, you're in that space right now, and that's has to be that way, because otherwise you're not gonna be successful at what you're doing. And sometimes, like say you're in the midst of finals, you're gonna do a lot less of everything else and a lot more studying, but that's the time that you're in at that point. So I think that balance is maybe on like a year, if you can look at work-life balance as being like, okay, did I spend enough time doing this and this and this? Did I go away on vacation? Did I spend great time with my family or my friends? So it's not like a daily or a weekly or a monthly necessarily. It's, you can go through periods where you work like an insane person. I've definitely done that, 100 and something hour weeks for months at a time, but it's what's required to get you to where you want to get to.
Cool. I failed at work-life balance so many times that I think it was only in the last like 6 months that I kind of sketched out my model in answer to your question, Howard. I used to think that, you know, being an achievement, very results-driven person that I was or am, that life and work was kind of like running a marathon. And I used to run marathons. I always had a finish line in sight, and I had to push until I got over that finish line. And that's how I used to work. And then I kind of revisualized, instead of it being a marathon or a race with a flag at the end or a finish line where you cross, I reframed the whole thought process around this. And I now think about my work and my life as kind of like tending to a garden. I plant some seeds, I cultivate, you know, I'm kind of surrounded by things that grow. I need to tend to that. You know, I'm not running anymore. It sure feels good. It feels much more level to be in this space. So it's kind of frame of mind, yeah.
It's a good example, but even with harvest time, you work your butt off, and you get to plant seeds and hang out for a while, but then you work your butt off from time to time. So it's good to take those breaks in between, but you don't need to be balanced all the time, just need to be balanced on the whole.
So much. Thank you very much. Very inspirational. We've talked about leaders not always knowing the answers to things, and we touched a little bit on Brené Brown and her the book right now that I think we're all reading, The Dare to Lead and Vulnerability. My question is, have you ever had any team members push back on the fact that you don't know and they think that you should know, and see that potentially as a weakness? How have you looked at that? How have you worked through that? And if not, how would you?
Step one, be embarrassed. Step two, deal with that team member. It's happened. People want to see you be in charge of everything and say, you know, where's the plan? And sometimes things just don't work out. And it sucks, but you just kind of pick up the pieces and say to that person, yeah, I don't know what's going on right now. I'm sorry, but I don't have all of the answers all of the time, and I'm just a human being like you are. But you know what? Let's work out a plan and find a way forward from here, and just work with that person. So it sucks every time it happens, and it will happen, and people will challenge you, and that's good. You want people to challenge you as a leader, because if everybody's just letting you sit on your laurels, then you're not getting better, and you're not giving your best if you're not getting better. So
I love the question, and you absolutely have had it with many teams where I'm not the expert. I'm an executive, and the teams are the folks who actually have the on-the-ground experience and the answers and the solutions. And so in my past, when I didn't know the answers, I think the best thing I did was, number one, admit that. Yeah, I don't know. But then ask them, what do you guys think? And just leave it at that.
Yeah, just to build on that. So, you know, I always think of myself as a coach, and the coach doesn't go rushing onto the field to play first base or shortstop or whatever. The coach is there to guide the team. And not, you know, the coach doesn't maybe sees things, but doesn't always have the answers or can't fix things, can't, you know, throw better pitches because they're not the pitcher. And so what I saw my role doing as a coach is to bring people together to have that conversation, because like Karmen's saying, the answers are with the team. They just don't maybe know it yet, and they're frustrated. They just want some solutions. Just tell me what to do. But you don't always know what that is. And so I think the best thing that you can do as a leader is bring people together to have the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences. My question has to do with the thought-making process, the decision-making process. They usually say leaders know the why and employees know the how or the what. So the way leaders make decisions are different by the way maybe employees make their decisions. So I was just wondering if you can walk us through as much as possible how you make your decisions in life, and how intentionality is important when you are making those decisions, especially when it comes to your long-term goals, even if that's business or life or both. Thank you.
The question is it's a huge one, huge. We could write a book about this. Yeah, I'll be brief though. Going back to that quote, I'm familiar with it. My response really is to the quote, and the quote around the leader knowing the why, but the team members knowing the how. My job as a leader is to ensure that the folks on the team know the why and buy into it or are engaged in it, and they believe it or behind it, so that it's not that discrepancy.
yeah, I think one of the big goals as a leader is to make sure that everybody in the organization understands why they're doing what they're doing, and how that leads towards the vision of the company and the long-term goals of whatever's happening. So whether that be life or otherwise, I think it's just comes from the general goal idea of saying this is where we're going, and all of the decisions should really line up with that direction. And you know, maybe there's a slight jog away from, but you're always going towards the North Star and making sure that everybody understands that North Star is there. If you get there with 16 lefts and 2 rights, that's fine. If you get there with 16 rights and 2 lefts, that's fine, as long as we're all headed in that direction. And I think that's always the way the decisions have to be done. Like everything that you do and say and all of the company vision, mission, values, it's always going towards that. On like a day-to-day basis, you know, like do we spend $200 on a printer? That doesn't have anything to do with the vision, but it's like, okay, we need the printer to print out something, so then, right? So it's small decisions, big decisions, and if they're strategic decisions, then they must be going towards that. If they're people decisions, then they must be about the culture of the company going towards the North Star and that kind of deal.
I love all of that. So what was coming up for me is there's this Warren Buffett quote. I'm not sure if I'm going to get it quite right, but it's something like delegate to the point of abdication. And it's basically about like empowering people to make those decisions. And part of that, I think, is sharing the why for sure. You know, the $200 printer, does that need to come to the COO? Maybe not. Maybe the office manager's got that and you're left free to make some other decisions. So I think there's a huge amount of ability as a leader to set the tone for that and empower other people to make those decisions. For me personally, like it's a combination of the head and the heart. And so, you know, I logic my way through things, I make the lists, I do the pro-con thing, but at the end of the day, I check in with my heart as well. And I have to say, a lot of times it's the heart that wins. It's the gut feel, it's that sense that this is the right thing to do. So I've seen that play out in my personal life and also in my work life.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
so
guys
much.
so much for coming today. Can you guys all please join me in thanking our panel and Sydney? I know for myself, just being around great leaders makes you want to be better at what you do, and you definitely inspire that.